Good afternoon. Good afternoon. The next item of business this afternoon is portfolio questions. Indeed, I didn't think the microphone was working. Good afternoon. That's the right echo. The next item of business is portfolio questions, and portfolio this afternoon is net zero, energy and transport. And at question number 1, I call Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government when it estimates that ScotRail will end the use of short-form trains that run on rail services between Fife and Edinburgh.
Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop.
A number of steps have been taken by ScotRail to improve the service for rail passengers travelling to and from Fife. Newly released diesel trains from some of the intercity routes are now serving Fife, increasing fleet resilience, and additional stops will continue to be made at Dalmeny and Burntisland to reduce pressure on busy morning and evening leave-in services. But I acknowledge that it was a challenging autumn with disruptions significantly higher than compared to the previous year. Despite this, ScotRail achieved a strong recovery, and available seat capacity for Fife recorded during the 4 weeks covering the festive period at 92.9%. Was higher than the same period in the previous year of 90.3%. We want that recovery and performance to continue, and I have asked for close monitoring of the Fife service to continue to improve capacity where possible to end short-formed use.
Murdo Fraser.
Well, I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her response. I have been raising this issue, as she knows, for years, and I am being promised for years it's going to get better, and it doesn't. And I've seen, even in the last few weeks, situations with 2-carriage trains pulling into Inverkeithing Station, already packed with passengers standing, not able to take on any more passengers, and having to leave those stranded on the platform, people waiting to get to their place of work in Edinburgh and therefore being late. And it happens time and time again. So can we please have a timescale by which this practice is going to end?
Cabinet Secretary.
I appreciate the concerns raised. Indeed, the Deputy Presiding Officer frequently raises that with me and with her correspondence. Can I say I absolutely sympathise with the situation. I remember regularly being on short-formed trains prior to the electrification of the Glasgow-Edinburgh line. It is not acceptable for passengers. The timescale, however, will depend on the fleet replacement, and of course I would want to update colleagues, MSPs in Fife, but also more widely when that occurs.
Supplementary, David Torrance.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that ScotRail must retain its operational independence that is necessary for them to respond to emergent situations, the availability of drivers and trains, and keep the trains running? And can she set out the importance of Fife, of its links to Edinburgh, and how the SNP government is committed to maintaining and improving it?
Cabinet Secretary.
So ScotRail, as the train operator, has the necessary level of expertise which allows it to allocate its resources to meet passenger demand as best suits. Of course, the Edinburgh link for Fife passengers and vice versa is very important, but particularly for Fife passengers commuting for education or leisure. I can say that electrification is underway, that work is underway between Edinburgh and Dalmeny. This is the first step towards electrification of the Fife routes. A rolling programme of decarbonisation and new fleet procurement strategies will reduce the need for diesel trains across the network and bring in new trains with improved reliability. In addition, we are investing £35 million on a new feeder station at Thornton in Fife to facilitate the future electrification of Fife services.
And supplementary, Claire Baker.
Thank you. In November, the Cabinet Secretary said in a letter she'd made clear to ScotRail that the situation in Fife must improve as quickly as possible. But figures from ScotRail show that in November, the 7016 service from Perth to Edinburgh was short-formed on more than half of its timetabled journeys, leaving passengers unable to board. Short-form services are not reflected within the public performance measure, so how is the Scottish Government and ScotRail taking them into account in terms of assessing and improving service delivery for passengers?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I'm clear that there needs to be improvement. It is an issue that I constantly do raise with ScotRail. In terms of the number of trains booked and in terms of seat availability, I've asked for regular reports from that. I've received that, and that's why I can relay in terms of the seat performance, particularly over the last 4 weeks, that there has been improvements. But I acknowledging the situation in November, in my first answer, I did say there were significant disruptions during that period, many of which can be down to a number of variety of factors, including infrastructure.
Question number 2, Ros McCall.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it will work with local authorities to address road improvements.
Minister Jim Fairley.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Clearly, we all recognise it's important for there to be a safe, resilient road network right across Scotland. However, as local roads are the responsibility of the local authorities, it is for the individual councils to allocate the resources based on their local needs. The Scottish Government is providing over £15 billion in 2025-26 in the local government settlement, increasing the resources available to local government by £1 billion, a real terms increase of 4.7%. At the same time, in the budget for 25-26, we are proposing to increase expenditure in the trunk road maintenance to £714 million.
Ros McCall.
I thank the Minister for that response, but since 2022, there have been over 26,000 reported potholes on Fife's roads, including 224 potholes alone on the 6 roads leading in and out of the village of Sallen in West Fife. The cost of fixing the backlog of repairs in Fife has increased by over £23 million, and it now sits at £100 million. Despite the slight uplift mentioned by the Minister in the Council's budgets this year, the councils have been struggling with underfunding for almost 2 decades. And the higher bills for repairs simply means less resources for other priorities. Does the Minister accept that the money spent by local authorities to fill these thousands of road defects would be better spent on long-term surface road improvements? And how will the Scottish Government work with local authorities to establish a fairer funding process which would allow our councils to actually fix this backlog?
Minister.
Well, as I've just said in my previous answer, the Scottish Government has already increased the local authority funding this year to over £1 billion. But I fully accept the frustration that the member makes. But these decisions about how they're going to repair their roads in local authorities really are the decision for the local authorities to take.
A supplementary, Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. From the 1st of January to 12th of November last year, North Ayrshire saw motorists endure 2,457 days of closed roads. The Minister will understand the frustration of many road users at the duration of closures, especially when there is no visible work being carried out or no one on site. What more can the Scottish Government do to work with local authorities and indeed through their own network to diminish the negative impacts of lengthy closures and minimise their occurrence?
Minister.
I absolutely understand the frustration of the road closures in the same way as I do with the potholes, especially when these sites appear to be empty. But generally there are good engineering and safety reasons, and closures are normally only utilised where they are unavoidable, either to protect Scotland's road workers or the public. Local authorities have existing powers to direct unreasonably prolonged works to be complete by a given date and have inspectorate powers on utility works. And myself and the Cabinet Secretary recently met with the Scottish Roadworks Commissioner, and we raised the coordination of works as one of the issues. Since April 24, the Commissioner also has inspector powers that will be reported on in the next annual report. That frustration is something that both myself and the Cabinet Secretary emphasised to him, and that this frustration is causing real concern.
Question number 3, Christine Graham.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on what discussions it has had with the UK Government Transport Secretary regarding the £5 million contribution that the previous administration made towards a feasibility study into the extension of the Borders Railway.
Cabinet Secretary.
I last raised concerns with the UK Government Ministers for Transport in October and was assured that overall growth deal funding commitments in Scotland would continue, which was reflected in their budget. The Scottish Government have agreed in principle to the proposal for a project manager to oversee the business case of the extension of the Borders Railway, and similar approval is still awaited from the UK Government. I have requested a meeting with the new Secretary of State for Transport, and I intend to raise this matter then.
Christine Graham.
Thank you very much. I thank the Cabinet Secretary for an answer, because this is pressing. I do hope that we will shortly have from the UK Government a timeline for delivery of their half share of the 10 million towards the extension and the feasibility study. I ask this because, quite rightly, the Cabinet Secretary has referred to the Senior Project Manager, and Borders Council has agreed to appoint one effective as from April. And while they are prepared to fund it if they have to from that time, I don't think that that is fair to the Council. So I hope this will be impressed upon the UK Government. Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I will indeed. I do think we have to recognise that the Borderlands Inclusive Growth Deal is a cross-border arrangement. It's important that we don't, as the Scottish Government, bypass this or other deals governance that requires project proposals to be approved by both governments. I know Scottish Borders Council is keen to progress. I'm keen to progress, and so that's the point I will raise to them. I don't think it's fair that Borders Council has been left for this length of time, and obviously they're carrying some risk if they want to appoint in April.
And supplementary, Rachel Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I completely agree with what the Cabinet Secretary has just said. There is a risk that the Scottish Borders Council will be bankrolling this funding for a feasibility study for the project manager to be in place. But would it be helpful for the Cabinet Secretary to work, for us to work in a cross-party manner so that we can put pressure on the Labour Government to release the £5 million in funding which has already been promised in the budget?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I know that members cross-party will continue to do that. As the member is aware, I visited Galashiels. I've met with the campaign group there. But I do think in terms of that activity, I have a role as Cabinet Secretary for Transport. I have not only just raised this issue about funding support for those general growth deals issues. In October, I did it actually in my first meeting with the then Secretary of State for Scotland, looking at other issues, including the Union Connectivity Fund, for example, and what was going to happen with it. So I'll take my responsibilities forward when I get an opportunity to meet with the Secretary of State for Transport. And I think if all parties can help support that case, that would be very helpful.
Question number 4, Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to ScotRail ticket officers scoring 1 out of 5 in the most recent service quality inspection regime data.
Cabinet Secretary.
These scores are disappointing, and I would expect to see facilities provided which meet the needs of passengers. However, these scores demonstrate that Squire is one of the most rigorous regimes of its kind, and many of the target levels are set at 90% or higher, auditing 362 stations, 250 trains in every 4-week period. It is this rigorous approach to inspection by the Scottish Government that helps ScotRail achieve consistently higher passenger satisfaction scores when compared to other GB rail operators, and most recently scoring 90% for overall passenger satisfaction. The failures that mentioned by the member are linked to ticket offices when staff are not present to open the office when expected, and therefore provide access to facilities. ScotRail has advised us that the opening times for ticket offices will become more reliable once the revised opening times have been agreed and all necessary arrangements to implement the changes have been put in place.
Faisal Chowdhury.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. Transport Scotland stated the low score of ticket office was due to the pending outcome of the station opening hours staff consultation. But this issue is long-standing, with ticket offices scoring 1 out of 5 in almost every inspection since 2023. Can the Cabinet Secretary advise what previous actions the Scottish Government sought from ScotRail to resolve these issues, and can the ongoing consultation be considered a fair assessment of the service if it isn't currently being delivered?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I am concerned that clearly in terms of ticket offices, when you've gone from 78% of tickets being bought at a ticket office down to 14%, that there'll be circumstances, whether it's on staffing, whether it's for reasons of other maintenance or other issues where staff want to be elsewhere, that perhaps the office is then closed when it's meant to be opened. That hasn't helped these scores. That should and could be resolved if there was more certainty and reliability of when ticket offices will be made open.
And supplementary, Colin Beattie.
Can the Cabinet Secretary set out specifically how the pending outcome of the ongoing station opening hours consultation would have affected these scores? how the Government expects to see significantly improved scores and how all of this will drive efficiency and improvements in our publicly owned railway.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, we need efficiency and we need improvement on our railway. Clearly, the management of that is under the responsibility of ScotRail. But I do think, as I've answered previously, that the new regime in terms of ensuring that there are staff made available at stations. They may not be in ticket offices, but they will be at stations for the vast majority of changes. And indeed, those stations where it's increases, where we're getting to see more accessibility for use of ticket barriers, etc. Things move on, things change, things need to be improved. But as the Squire and inspectors will use the agreed times for inspection purposes, we would expect to see ticket offices and facilities open and fully functional, as I explained in my previous answer, because there's a certainty and a reliability that is not there currently.
Question number 5, Megan Gallagher.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what additional measures will be introduced to support rural housing providers to achieve the net zero emissions target by decarbonising social housing.
Minister Alistair Allen.
We are committed to delivering vital support to decarbonise homes through the Social Housing Net Zero Heat Fund. The fund has been supporting social landlords to retrofit their housing stock since 2020. To date, the fund has helped more than 13,000 homes to decarbonise. To support rural housing providers, the most recent fund refresh included a grant per property uplift for rural and remote rural locations of 11% and 22% respectively. This acknowledges the increased costs in rural locations and heeds calls from the sector to ensure a just transition to net zero.
Megan Gallagher.
Rural housing providers face unique and complex challenges that set them apart from urban areas, and when attempting to meet net zero targets, they are faced with high retrofit costs due to traditional construction, lack of access to skilled labour and materials, and, as the Minister cited in his response there, funding gaps, but the grants that are given by the Government often fall short of covering the substantial costs with decarbonising rural housing. And that's not to mention the difficulties to comply with EPCC due to the issues that I've just raised. This needs to be fully set out in the Heat in Buildings framework when the bill comes to Parliament. Therefore, will the Minister commit to working towards a tailored strategy for rural communities that does not leave them at a disadvantage?
Minister.
Well, the member rightly points to the different situations that exist, both in terms of location and in terms of distinctive housing types in many parts of rural Scotland, and we are committed to building on progress made to improving the energy efficiency of those houses. And while some rural and island households have made the transition, we recognise that for some properties there are limitations due to that location or building type, or indeed due to grid capacity. And the Scottish Government support is available in rural and island communities to improve the energy efficiency of homes and to switch heating systems, for example through the Social Housing Net Zero Heat Fund and various other schemes. And many of those schemes are available or include a rural and islands uplift to reflect the very issues the member rightly points to.
Supplementary, Emma Roddick.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm frequently contacted by people in rural and island communities who are struggling to figure out what's available to them in order to make improvements that they want to make to their homes. So can the Minister lay out what additional support is available for energy efficiency improvements to households in rural and island areas, including through the Home Energy Scotland grant and loan scheme?
Minister.
The Home Energy Scotland grant and loan offers an uplift of £1,500 to the grant funding available for energy efficiency measures in remote rural areas and in islands. Through our area-based schemes, we provide an uplift to reflect higher delivery costs in those same areas. Households in extreme fuel poverty in those remote rural and island areas can benefit from insulation improvements worth up to £21,100. The Warmer Homes Scotland scheme operates a national customer price model to ensure equal access to grant-funded installation of energy efficiency improvements across Scotland, including in the areas that the member mentions.
Question number 6, Stuart McMillan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it provide an update on Transport Scotland's engagement with Peel Ports regarding the introduction of a conservancy fee for leisure vessels sailing on the River Clyde.
Cabinet Secretary.
While some of Scotland's ports are publicly owned or owned by communities, most are owned by commercial entities like Peel Ports. It is for port owners to determine how best to manage their assets and utilise their resources, obviously within the boundaries of any statutory requirements or limitations. How, when and what to charge in terms of fees and dues forms part of this. However, I am aware that this proposal has raised a number of concerns from vessel owners across Scotland who access the Clyde Estuary. I therefore wrote to Peel Ports on the 18th of December regarding this issue.
Stuart Millen.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that helpful reply, and she is very much aware of the concerns of the boating community, and she'll also be aware of the work that I've undertaken alongside Kenneth Gibson and Claire Adamson, MSP, with regards to the cross-party group that I convene. But can the Cabinet Secretary confirm whether she will be prepared to meet with members of the boating community to listen to their serious concerns about the proposal and also advise on what powers the Scottish Government has to prevent such a fee from being imposed?
Cabinet Secretary.
Ship, passenger and goods dues are charges which can be levied under the 1964 Harbours Act. The levels at which dues are set is essentially a commercial matter for the relevant port authority. However, Section 31 of the Act provides a right of objection to Scottish ministers against the imposition of ship, passenger and goods charges if certain criteria are met, although this has never been used in the last 25 years. So any person considering making a formal objection should take independent legal advice. So, as ministers potentially have an adjudication role, it may not be appropriate to meet directly with anyone seeking to legally object, but I'm sure Mr Macmillan, as he is doing today, can represent the interests of his constituents from the boating community. And I also understand that Peel Port have committed to conduct a consultation before considering introducing any new charges. So I encourage any member of the boating community to engage with that, and I'm sure Mr Macmillan, as he is doing today, will continue to represent his constituents in this area.
Supplementary, Paul Sweeney.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. As Peel has jurisdiction from the River Clyde at Glasgow Green right the way down to the Firth of Clyde, this has a significant impact on about 450 square miles of inshore waters. Peel have claimed that conservancy fees for leisure vessels is a common practice by other statutory harbour authorities. I did ask the Scottish Government if they could provide data on that, but they don't hold that data. I find that alarming. Could the Minister understand why that is the case? Could she look to try and gather that data about what other statutory harbour authorities do with respect to leisure vessel conservancy fees, and look at the oversight and regulation of port authorities in Scotland more generally?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I've set out in my previous answer the oversight and the governance aspects of that, but these are commercial operators. The vast majority of ports are commercial operators. We would not hold information about commercial entities in a whole variety of different areas. However, with the current issue and concerns, I will see what is possible in relation to identifying whether other commercial ports would be prepared to share their information in order to get a better understanding, because I understand other ports authorities do charge in a way that hasn't been done for some of the vessels that we're discussing.
Question number 7, Gordon MacDonald.
To ask the Scottish Government what is the current value of Scotland's renewable energy output to the UK economy.
Minister Gillian Martin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The majority of electricity generated in Scotland is from renewable sources, and Scotland plays a crucial role in the UK's overall renewable energy landscape. As of September 24, Scotland hosts 27% of UK renewable electricity capacity. Work by the Fraser of Allender Institute in 2023 estimated that in 2021, Scotland's renewable energy sectors and supply chains supported over £10.1 billion worth of output, more than 42,000 full-time equivalent jobs and over £4.7 billion of gross value added across the Scottish economy.
Gordon MacDonald.
I thank the Minister for that answer. It's vital we continue to maximise Scotland's renewable capabilities and take full advantage of our abundant natural resources. Can the the Minister say how much electricity demand is met by renewables and how the proposed budget will continue to invest and grow this capacity?
Minister.
Thank you, Gordon MacDonald, for that supplementary question. 2023, an estimated 67.8 64.7% of the electricity consumed in Scotland came from renewable sources, but it continues to grow. In Q3 of last year, for example, it had risen over 8% on the same period of 2023. The path to net zero presents enormous economic opportunities, supporting a just transition that creates jobs, promotes private investment and brings communities with us. And the recent budget announced that in 25-26 we're committing £4.9 billion in capital and resource spend for activities that will have a positive impact on the delivery of our climate change goals. We're almost tripling our capital funding in offshore wind to £150 million, and this investment is year 2 of our 5-year commitment to invest up to that £500 million to anchor the supply chain in Scotland, which is expected to leverage additional private investment of £1.5 billion in the infrastructure and manufacturing facilities that are critical to the growth of the sector.
And very brief supplementary, Maurice Golden.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. It has been 2 years since the Scottish Government unveiled its draft energy strategy and just transition plan. Russell Borthwick, Chief Executive at Aberdeen and Grampian Chamber of Commerce, said, "We've been promised numerous times since that the final version would be published, but we are still waiting, strategyless." End quote. The Scottish Government is asleep at the wheel, so when will the final strategy be published?
Minister, briefly.
As I have said in many answers to similar questions that I've had from the Conservative benches, we have had a shifting landscape in terms of the reserved policy in this area, which is having an impact on some of our responses in our draft energy strategy. So we're taking time to look at that and some of the issues that the First Minister mentioned in the FMQs around some of the court cases that have come forward, which have an impact on that. We want this energy strategy to be fit for purpose. We're working very hard on it. We have been working very hard on it. We're taking into account all the consultation and responses, and it will be published shortly.
And I can squeeze in question number 8 if I get brief questions and answers to match. Question number 8, Mark Griffin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions the Net Zero Secretary has had with ministerial colleagues regarding whether unused funds from energy efficiency area-based grant schemes could be reallocated, including to reduce fuel poverty in the coming financial year.
Minister Alistair Allen.
I met ministerial colleagues on the 12th of September 2024 to agree the issuing of grant offers for area-based schemes. We agreed that this was a priority and noted the challenge in completing some projects by March. The grant offer therefore extends to June 2025 to help ensure ABS project completion. We have also boosted fuel poverty support this winter by allocating an extra £20 million to Warmer Homes Scotland, taking it to £85 million. And through the budget for 25-26, we propose to invest over £300 million in our heat and buildings programmes, including support for those in fuel poverty.
Mark Griffin.
I thank the Minister for that answer. Area-based schemes are place-based approaches that can transform whole neighbourhoods, improving health, creating jobs and cutting greenhouse gas emissions. But over the last 3 years, over £60 million of a possible £192 million has gone unspent. And that's because, as the Minister highlighted, that councils often don't receive their grant allocation until well into the financial year, as he highlighted September for 2024. So can I ask the Minister whether the Scottish Government will commit to making sure that the funding is made available to councils in time to ensure that the funds are spent on those vital services throughout the course of the year?
Minister.
As the member identifies, these are very valuable schemes in terms of addressing fuel poverty. Area-based schemes funding of up to £64 million was identified in 2024-25 budget documents, and as per the distribution agreed with COSLA. However, the issue around the ABS 25-26 grant offers was delayed until September 24 due to what I hope the member and others will acknowledge was an emergency spending control situation that the Scottish Government faced. However, the member will be aware from what I've said of the value which the Scottish Government places on these schemes.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes portfolio questions on net zero energy and transport. Apologies to those members I was not able to squeeze in.